Zimbabwe faces a crisis of rebuilding, and as a nation we're at a place where we need to choose whether we will rebuild on worldly systems or we will rebuild in a godly way. Rebuilding on the current systems, the worldly systems, demands that we bring in investment, we bring in the top guys, the guys who know, and it tends to be a top-down approach. And we know that from scriptures, God builds from the bottom up. And we need to pray that we as Zimbabweans will rebuild our nation in a godly bottom-up way. If we look in the scriptures, we see that the turning point for any nation is repentance. If my people who are called by my name would humble themselves and pray, I will heal their land. We believe that God is in the process and has already healed our land, but we then need to rebuild on what He shows us. The two key things on which this nation will be rebuilt is humility and unselfishness. When we humble ourselves and see God as He is, then we will see what He is calling us to, and we will start to have unselfish hearts. Unselfishness is what allows us to build communities, because when we have selfishness in our hearts and we have self-interest, we don't see the need of our neighbor or our brother or our friend. But when we are looking with the unselfish heart of Christ, we can see where the need is, and whatever we have then becomes of use to other people. In any national rebuilding, agriculture has to be the entry point. Most countries that have developed as a nation have done so from a green revolution. And in fact, this is very biblical, because we are called to be faithful with the first things that God gives us. When you look at the nation of Israel, when God formed Israel as a nation, the first thing He gave them was land. And then He asked them to be faithful with that. And then He adds to that. Most industry grows from the resources God has given us, and as we faithfully steward them, He adds on, and that's how development comes. Starting with any other industry that's not agriculture tends to require resources that we don't have as a nation, and then we are forced to borrow, or we are forced to bring in other people's resources that tend to come with their own strings.
Then I asked the Lord, okay, that's why we're so poor. How do we come out of poverty? And He answered me in a very simple way that I didn't expect. He said, teach Africa to make a profit. It doesn't sound too spiritual at first, but actually it is, because it's a result of faithfulness. And if your expenditure exceeds your income, you're losing money. God showed me that there are only two alternatives for survival other than making a profit. And one is the begging bowl, and secondly it's theft. Both of those things are negative. And then I said to the Lord, how do you teach Africa to make a profit? And He answered in a very simple way again. God's genius is not complicated. He said, in order to make a profit, there are three things you must do. You must do, everything you do must be done on time, at a decent standard, and without wastage. Those three things are the first three He gave in a package. And I've been a producer for many years, and I've seen now, looking back, that if you, and we've seen since then, that if you do those three things, invariably you make a profit. God's given us an amazing technology in agriculture that follows His ways in nature. I came out to the bush like this here, on the farm, where nobody's been intervening with nature as God has designed it for hundreds and hundreds of years. And I came and I asked God to open my eyes, and I saw firstly that the leaves fall down in the ground, and they come down and the grass dies down, and there's a beautiful blanket over the earth. You can see previous leaves from different years here, and it protects it from the impact of the raindrop. And this is so important to God, because this here is the material that feeds the little beetles and worms that live in this whole horizon here. And then it also protects the surface, and it feeds the microorganisms in the soil eventually as it gets taken down into the profile. And then what I also noticed in God's natural creation, there's no inversion tillage. There's no turning over of the soil. And so I saw that surely if this bush has survived for thousands of years, it doesn't die of disease or pests or lack of ploughing or lack of nutrition. There's a whole beautiful cycle here that God has put in. And so I thought, well, if He's the designer, I want to come and emulate what He does.
Soil is an ecosystem. It's alive with all forms of life, and most of this life exists beneath the surface. At the top, there's God's blanket, and this is the fallen leaves and the decaying grass that cover the soil. When the rains come, and in most of Africa we have heavy torrential rain that pounds the earth like so many small hammers. When that happens, unprotected earth, like a plowed field for instance, takes the brunt of that. But where there is mulch cover, the impact of the raindrops is reduced, and in addition, this helps to retain moisture so that even in a heavy drought situation, your water loss is minimized. As the blanket decays, it provides food for the organisms that live in the soil. Soil is well and truly alive, with billions of creatures living in it. God has a purpose in all things. The mulch is initially broken down by the decomposers. These are the aerobic bacteria and the small animals that are most active at the top layer of the soil. Lower down, earthworms perform other key tasks. Earthworms turn organic matter into humus, and this improves the water retaining properties of the soil. It adds nutrients, and it makes soil more workable. Also, by their burrowing, earthworms increase soil aeration and drainage. And so you find that soil with a large earthworm population is very healthy soil. Plowing destroys this whole ecosystem. When you turn the soil over, the aerobic organisms that need air and live near the top of the soil and the mulch cover, they get buried. And the anaerobic organisms that live at the lower end and don't need air, they get exposed, and essentially you kill both. But more than that, you destroy the roots that bind the soil and the burrows that the earthworms create. And in the end, soil compacts, creating very heavy clods that are thick but have very little aeration in them, and they have very little ability to retain water. And when it rains, this now much lifeless soil just gets washed away, and over time you lose both your soil and the nutrients in it.
After planting this tomato, they had the drought for 3 weeks. But all people who planted, we are many and we have planted tomatoes, but the other tomatoes are died. But my tomatoes not died because I put this blanket. You see this blanket? It covers the water. All the water are still here. So it's fine with me with this tomato because of this blanket, because it keeps all moisture.
The other people who are planting tomatoes, are they planting on ridges?
Yeah, on ridges. They're digging and make the pools, the holes and plant there. All tomatoes are died. But me, I don't make a ridges. I just take my line and put the hose and plant my tomato.
Yeah, it looks good.
When did you plant?
It was planted on the 4th and the 5th of November.
Okay.
Yes.
It's taller than you.
Yeah, it is. It's going so fast. Yeah, see, you see on this field, every year we plant on the same planting station and then we don't make ridges. You can see the mulch. I mean, it's just there. And you can even see the soils are improving. If you see our soil and then you compare with our friend's soil, our neighbors, is quite different. My plots are, about 1.5 hectare, but per hectare I harvest something more than 120 bags, which is very good. You see, that is different from all these other people because the way they farm it, they cannot get that much. They usually get 30 bags per hectare.
When I farmed before, the same garden which I'm using today, I was harvesting 3 to 6 bags per annum. And when this man came to my house, he taught me, and we went to America to have some training of farming God's way. And there I learned. And for the first time, I saw a big difference in my life and even in my family. I was staying in a certain house, even myself. I was staying the same house with pigs. I'm not just saying. And those people who was there, they know. And when I started doing this farming God's way, the Lord challenged me that it's not just this way you was doing. There's somebody who can take care for you. And I just followed him and obeyed him, followed his principles, how to do farming God's way. And from 3 to 6, for the first time, I harvested 70 bags. And it was amazing in 2002. And I was saying, Lord, is it really you, God? And I really asked myself, and I was really screaming. And even those people, you see me now, you can see it's difficult even to express the joy which I had for the first time when I'm using the farming God's way. Somebody who was looking down upon himself, like I cannot do anything, but God used this method to provide, to build even my own, to buy the land and build my own house. And now it's really a good house. And now the old house which we had, we broke all the walls. Now we are using it as a church, and people are meeting there. We are meeting together, fellowship together, and have a good time there, praising the Lord.
He has promoted conservation agriculture, and not only in the post-land reform era, even before the land reform. Brian Audrey's in the Mashonaland Central Province, in Mazowe district. He was working with the smallholder producers long before we even started talking about the need to have land reform in Zimbabwe. The average yield of maize in the conservation agriculture sites that are dotted around the country, we're talking about 4 to 5 tons per hectare, right? And that's out in the smallholder sector. And the average national yield now, we're talking of the whole country, is hovering around 0.8 tons per hectare. So you can see the difference that the conservation agriculture project in the country is contributing towards food security.
So what's possible with the current situation with foundations for farming? At the minute, Zimbabwe's entire grain requirements per annum is 2.2 million metric tons. And we have approximately 2/3 of our people living in the rural areas, most of who can farm. Currently, our farmers are achieving less than 1 ton per hectare, but with foundations for farming, they can achieve a minimum of 3 tons, a maximum of anything up to 5, 6, 7 sometimes. If all 6 million of them were getting at least 3 million tons, we are talking of a green revolution in just one season. So what's possible is that Zimbabwe's rural farmers are, in fact, the growth engine. And with this program, we're transforming Zimbabwe one village at a time.